Welcome to our continuing series on Megillas Rus. This week, we review the conceptual structures we put in place previously to give the Megillah context and the greater oeuvre of Tanach. We contrast Elimelech and Naomi's actions with that of Lot and Rus's actions with Avraham. We note a continuing pattern that presents itself with David and Ittai haGitti, and then we set the stage for chapter 2 by stacking the deck against the entrance of a female Moabite into the Jewish people. We prepare for chapter 2 with a brief look at the commandment of Leket, the right of a poor person to collect certain produce from the field. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, so some key takeaways from chapter 1. Welcome.
Which one are you packing?
No worries. Just some key takeaways from chapter 1. So, what we're trying to do with the story of Rus in general is see it in light of in light of the context of Tanach. By which I mean, we've said this many times before, the greatest commentary that we have on Chumash is Nach, right? So when we're looking at the story of Rus, we have to be familiar with the antecedents. Where are Rus and Boaz and Naomi, where are all these people coming from historically? So we saw the story of Lot and his daughters, and we saw the story of Yehuda and Tamar. And we understand that those are sort of the precursors, and those are the paradigms that we need to have in mind when we hear this story, and then we can compare and contrast what elements of what we're reading are similar and what elements are breaking the parallel, or breaking the mold intentionally so. I think in Parak Aleph we can look at Elimelech and Naomi through the lens of Lot. So you have the story with Lot. We didn't read it inside, but I think everyone's familiar. Lot separates from Avraham, right? It even uses the language "he pared na me'alai," that Avraham and Lot's. Let's just back up and go through the story very quickly. Avraham and Lot have a lot of cattle and flocks of whatever they have flocks of, and they're grazing, and there is arguments between the shepherds of Avraham and the shepherds of Lot. And Avraham says, "Look, we're brothers. There's no reason for us to have disagreement." He says, "He pared na me'alai. Please separate from me. If you want to go to the left, I'll go to the right, etc., etc." And that's the beginning of Lot's choice in going to Sodom. That's the precursor of Lot going to Sodom, is the stinginess of Lot, that he and his wealth can't get along with Abraham, who is taking care of him, who is the person who's raised him his whole life. It doesn't matter. He's willing to leave the Jew, right, which is what Elimelech and Naomi do. They leave Beis Lechem out of stinginess, not wanting to share what they had with the people of Beis Lechem, and they go to Moab, or in Lot's case, he goes to the precursor of Moab, which is Sodom. There's actually and then what is the result? The end result of Elimelech and Naomi going to Sodom is that only one adult is left. Nobody else in the family survives except for two girls, right? No. Lot's two daughters are the only people who survive besides Lot. Okay. Right. And with Naomi, it's not the two daughters, it's the daughter-in-laws, but it's the same basic, structure. It's one adult from the previous generation and then two females from the younger generation. The Medrash, I think it's the Medrash Tanchuma, compares the phrase "Vayhi bimei shvot hashoftim." It was in the days when the judges judge. Says the Medrash, when else has there been a period where the judges were judged? That was in Sodom. Sodom would judge their own judges, right? That was what the people of Sodom said to Lot, that, "Oh, are you going to judge us?" So if we set Naomi and Elimelech up as the Lot paradigm, so to speak, the Abraham paradigm is reflected in Rus, right? Abraham is Lechacha me'artzecha me'modlantecha me'beis avicha. He leaves behind his whole world to go where God wants him to go. Rus does the same thing. That she leaves behind her whole family, her everything, to go to join the Jewish people. I think we mentioned at the very outset
clearly roles reversal.
Right. One of the things that we mentioned at the very outset is this idea that the story of Rus is coming to address the curses, the problems that we identified in Parshas Bereshis. There were two specific curses: the fruit of the womb and the fruit of the land. Right? Avraham deals with both of those curses in terms of questions that he asked God. He says, "Ma titein li v'anuchi holech arari." He asked God, "Who's going to be my descendant? I don't have any children." And he also says, "B'ma idaki rashena." How am I going to know that I have a connection to the land? That there's a Yerusha, there's a permanent connection that I should have with Eretz Yisrael. The outcome, the goal of Megillas Rus is to get you to the lineage of David HaMelech, right? We talked about this with Yehuda and Tamar. That's the precursor. They have parrots, and then the end of the Megillah traces the line from parrots all the way to David HaMelech. And the purpose of the book is to give you the genealogy, to give you the backstory of how did we get to a David HaMelech. The concept of kingship, the concept of Malchus in the Chumash starts with, of all people, the king of Sodom. The war of the 5 kings against the 4 kings. The first time you get people mentioned by name as being a king. There's one mention earlier about Nimrod having a malchut, that his kingship extended to a certain degree. But the first time someone is called a king is by the king of Sodom, where you have the 5 kings against the 4 kings. That situation itself is very.
Is it Sodom? Is he the king of Sodom? He's the 4 kings against the 5 kings.
Yes, one of those is the king of Sodom.
Oh, one of them.
Yes,
okay.
correct.
They don't all come from Sodom.
No, they don't all come from Sodom. They have their own little fiefdoms. Correct. What's interesting is at the end of that story, you get Malki Tzedek, who shows up and he provides lechem v'yain. He takes out food, which is the opposite of what the Moabites did. So after Avraham goes through and saves Lot, Malki Tzedek says, first of all, here's food, and second of all, he provides a blessing, right? Baruch Avraham le'el elyon, and Baruch el elyon koneh shamayim, right? Whatever his bracha was, that's again the opposite of what the Moabites are in trouble for, is bringing Bilam to curse the Jews. And in the first story of kingship, you have someone who is blessing the Jews. There is one more interesting pattern that I just want to read very, very briefly to you, and that is the story of David HaMelech and a gentleman named Ittai. Ittai haGitti. And that is in Shmuel Bet, Parak 15. Welcome. In Shmuel Bet, David, let's see where we start.
Did you mention Ittai last week?
Ittai haGitti?
Yeah. I've heard that name somewhere. Yeah.
I still want to know what happened to Shamgar.
From Shmuel? Yeah, Shmuel nothing. It's in Shmuel. That's not what I heard.
Ittai? I don't know. It's not a Jewish name necessarily. I don't know if there are a lot of Ittais around.
You didn't mention it Friday night? You didn't mention it Friday night?
Maybe on Friday night. We did a little preview. Okay, so there is a rebellion.
Previews on us. Keep the rest of us in the dark.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Shabbos we do like a remix.
Was it recorded?
No, there was no Zoom. There was no recording on Shabbos. What happens on Shabbos stays on Shabbos. Vayishlach Avshalom.
Our shul records on Shabbos. Which shul? Our shul. Record what? The video goes on Shabbos. Oh, the video. Yeah.
Oh, the security.
Security.
Okay. I won't tell anybody if you won't.
The rabbi had a little tape recorder underneath the shtanda. You weren't supposed to know about that.
Vayishlach Avshalom meraglim b'chol shiftei Yisrael lemor kishamachem as kol hashofar v'amartem malach Avshalom b'Chebron. So this is David's son. Avshalom is rebelling against him, and he's setting up this whole coup. They're going to blow the shofar, and everyone needs to respond that Avshalom is now the king. Yes, Avshalom halchu 200 ish miYerushalayim kruim v'holchim l'tumam. Yadu kol davar v'yishlach Avshalom es Achitofel haGilyoni yoatz David meiro Megillo b'zavcho es azvachim v'hi hakesher hamitzvah am holech v'raves Avshalom v'yavo hamagid el David. So now the coup is in process, and the magid, the person who's telling this over, comes to David Lemor saying, Haya leiv ish Yisrael acharei Avshalom. The heart of every man of the Jewish people is after Avshalom. Vayomer David l'chol havadav asher yito b'Yerushalayim kumu v'nivracha We have to get out of here because we have no way to save ourselves from Avshalom. So we're with you. We're your servants. We're going to stick with you through thick and thin. The king leaves behind a garrison of Pilagshim to guard the house. The haGittis, Sheshmios ish asher ba'u baraglo migas ovrim al pnei hamelech. So this is very interesting. We're going to have to unpack this a little bit in a different share. But there are 600 men from the city of Gas. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Where's Gas? Gat.
Goliath.
Goliath comes from Gat, yes.
Yeah.
What is Goliath? What nationality is Goliath?
He's Moabite.
He's not Moabite. He's a Philistine. He's a Plishti. Why do you think he's a Moabite?
Because he's the grandson of
he's
Orpah.
A descendant of Orpah. Right. Which is itself very interesting. So Orpah, we didn't cover this last week in any meaningful way, but Orpah leaves and Chazal excoriate her. That we have like a whole daf in Sota talking about how promiscuous she was after she turned and left. And part of what they do in that daf is to trace her as the forebearer of Goliath, and then you have some sort of poetic justice where David kills the great-grandson of Rus kills the great-grandson of Orpah. What's interesting is how could he be the great-grandson of Orpah if he's from Gas and she's from Moab and she went back ostensibly to Moab, and we know that you are where you're from, right? But here David has these 600 soldiers that also come from Gas, and David seems to have a very interesting and complex relationship with the Plishtim and with Gas specifically because
they hide him.
Yes, excellent. When do they hide him?
He acts all crazy and throwing poop.
Well, he salivates. He lets his saliva run down his beard. Yes, the king. Does anybody remember the name of the king of Gas at the time?
Avimelech.
So that's what he's named. So he's named Avimelech in Tehillim, and it seems to be a generic name for the king of the Plishtim because Avraham has an Avimelech that he deals with. But his name is Achish. Achish Melech Gas. We're going to unpack that a little bit more, God willing, in the future. Vayomer HaMelech El Ittai haGitti. And the king says to Ittai, who comes from Gas, he's a Gittite, Lama telach gam ata itanu shuv v'shev im hamelech ki nachri ata v'gam gola talim komecha. Why are you coming with us? You're not Jewish. You're a Nachri. Go back, right? Just like Naomi tells Rus, go back. David is telling Ittai also, there's no reason for you to come along. Go back. Tmol bo'acha v'hayom ani acha imanu lalechas v'ani holech al asher ani holech. I'm going wherever I'm going. Shuv v'hashev esachecha imach chesed v'emes. Go back and v'hashev esachecha, return with your brothers. Chesed imach chesed v'emes. They should do chesed and emes with you, just like Naomi was talking about the chesed that Rus did with her. Vayan Ittai es hamelech, and Ittai responds to this message of the king, who tells him to go back and there should be chesed done with you. Vayomer chai Adonai v'chei Adoni hamelech, by the life of God and by the life of my master the king. Ki im bimkom asher yeh sham Adoni hamelech im lamavas im lachayim ki sham yeh avadecha. Wherever you go, king, whether it's for life or death, wherever you are, that is where your servant is going. So Ittai makes a very similar, in substance, if not in language, a similar pledge to continue to remain with David the same way Rus makes this pledge to remain with Naomi.
There's a difference there.
Okay.
The end.
He doesn't say your God's my God, your people's my people.
No, right. He doesn't leave.
Yeah, he does. He does.
After that,
he doesn't stick with David.
Does he go back?
Goes back.
I think you're right.
You never see him again.
That's true. That you definitely don't see.
You never
again.
see him
That
again.
doesn't mean that he left.
He goes back.
You don't know that though.
I don't know. It doesn't
Unless
say
the
it
pasuk
explicitly.
says he goes back, I don't know if you could say that.
I don't think it says anything about it explicitly.
I mean, look at my guy Shamgar. Okay. Shamgar saves the Jewish people. Doesn't give you any details. Doesn't say how he lived, how he died, how he did this, how he did that. Just says save the Jewish people. If it's not in the pasuk.
No, he's right. Vayomer David el Ittai lech v'yavor Ittai haGitti v'chol nashav v'chol hataf asher ito.
So maybe he went to spy for him. Just
very
saying.
Good. Very good. Very good. Okay, but the purpose of illustrating that is to show you that there's what we call a type scene. There is a repeating pattern of the outsider, the non-Jew, who wants to remain with the Jew who's in desperate straits, and is pushed off, right? Is told to return, and that chesed should be done with them, and they refuse, and they insist on remaining. You're right. Orpah goes back, Ittai goes back.
And both of them, Ittai is a precursor to Rus.
Ittai is but he comes later. How could he be?
He comes earlier.
No.
Yes.
Rus is the great grandmother of David.
Right.
Okay. But
it's only codified afterwards.
Well, okay, so that's a very interesting point that I don't think we addressed in any extensive way. Who is the author of Megillas Rus? Shmuel. No, I don't think so. The Gemara in Baba Basra says Shmuel. What else did Shmuel write?
Sefer Shmuel.
Sefer Shmuel up until his death, at least. And
Malachim.
Nope.
One more Megillah, right?
Nope. Sefer Shoftim. Sefer Shoftim. Which is the background for when Rus takes place, right? It's that same language of Vayi bimei shvot hashoftim.
Right.
All three of these books are dealing with the absence or the construction of Malchut, right? They're all that's essentially what Shmuel's life is about, is creating Malchut. And so when you're reading Megillas Rus, you have to read it in that same context. That's why you're getting some of the same language as you're seeing in Sefer Shmuel, because they all are revolving around this same concept. What does it take to create kingship? What does it create to forge Malchus? Okay. That is by way of summary and review, chapter 1, or at least the high-level concepts of seeing chapter 1 through the lens of history and Tanach. Before we get into chapter 2, I want to set the stage a little bit let's point out two things. One is it's not really explicit in the Megillah, but I think we can even see it from the end of chapter 1, which is that the townspeople don't take very kindly to Naomi showing up with this Moabite girl. Nobody addresses her. Naomi doesn't address her. The people don't address her. And as we'll see in chapter 2, besides Boaz, no one gives her the time of day. No one is out to help her. Nobody shows up at their door with, food or help or in any way, shape, or form. The entire Beis Lechem essentially disregards Naomi, and Rus all the more so. But even Naomi, they don't extend any sort of help to her.
And you're attributing it to Rus. It could just be
no, I'm not attributing to Rus. The reason I'm calling attention to it is because, again, to look through the historical lens, essentially when we read chapter 2, what I want you to do is picture Beis Lechem as Sodom. You have people coming who are in need of food and shelter, and everybody disregards them.
Which is what they did to Beis Lechem.
That's exactly right. They're getting a taste of their own medicine, right? Naomi left Beis Lechem.
That's right. I'm saying,
but where I'm trying to go with it is that it's intentional. It's not that the narrator forgets to mention to us that, oh no, everybody was actually super nice and welcoming to Naomi. It's intentional. No one was nice to her, to the point where we'll see in the first couple of psukim, there's no food in the house, and Rus has to go out begging and collecting leket.
Is it like an unofficial cherem? Is it like an unofficial cherem that they were putting?
They're just shunning her.
They're shunning her. I think that's a great way to put it. Now, why are they shunning her?
It could also be that they, at the beginning of it, they left because of a famine.
Yes.
Isn't a lot going? Could
right,
be
but
that
then they
not...
go back because they hear there's food over there, don't they?
Yes, and well, we talked about this. Them leaving during the famine is the equivalent to the one person who had the food and the parnasa to take care of people packing out. They didn't leave because they had no food. They left because they had the food and didn't want to share it. Now, in both Ezra and Nehemiah, there is some very strong language against the Moabite people. Okay, so Ezra, if you recall, I think we did this like a year ago. Ezra comes from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, ukakalos, and we're in Parak Tes. Ukakalos Eila Nigshu Elai Hasarim Lemor Lo Nivdelu Ha'am Yisrael v'Kohanim v'Levim Mi'amei Ha'aratzos Ketoavosehem Leknani Hachitti Haprizi Hayevusi Ha'amoni Ha'moavi Ha'mitzri v'Ha'amori Ki Nas'u Mibnosehem Lahem v'Livnehem V'Hisarvu Zera HaKodesh Ba'amei Ha'aratzos. We intermarried, say the people, to Ezra. Kinasu mibnosehem. We married their daughters. We married their daughters to our sons. V'yanda sarim v'sagrim, etc., etc. And they go through this whole confession, and Ezra, leads them to the conclusion that they have to divorce and send away all these non-Jewish women that they married with. The problem or the question is, if we take seriously this drasha of, not a drasha, right? The conclusion we came to is that the drasha of Moavi v'lo Moavit is not what we base the halacha on. It's a halacha l'Moshe miSinai. And even, right, is this all ringing a bell? That first we thought, we can sort of read into the pasuk that the men are forbidden to marry into, but the women are okay. And Doeg Adomi asked a whole bunch of questions on that and kind of knocked that out. And then somebody shows up in the base medrash with a sword and says, no, it's a halacha l'Moshe miSinai, which apparently nobody knew, right? It's not a halacha l'Moshe miSinai that was widely accepted among the Jewish people. It seems that this one guy in the base medrash knew about it, and maybe Boaz, as we'll see later on. But here you have in Ezra, the people coming and confessing to marrying Moabite women, and the solution is not, just convert them. The solution is you have to get rid of them. And that's what, like, all of Ezra, Parak Tes, and Yud are about. And the same thing goes for Nehemiah 13. I'll just read you the first two psukim in Nehemiah 13. Bayom hahu nikra b'sefer Moshe b'aznei ha'am v'nimtza katuv bo. On that day, we read in the sefer of Moshe, in the ears of the people, v'nimtza katuv bo asher lo yavo amoni u'moavi b'kahal Elohim ad olam. That no Ammoni and Moavi is allowed into the kahal of God forever. Kilo kidmus b'nei Yisrael b'lechem v'mayim v'yizkor alav es bilam l'klal alo v'hafoch Elohinu ha'klal l'vracha. And this is all that we know. They didn't greet the Jewish people with lechem and mayim, and they hired out Bilam to curse the Jewish people, and God changed it around to a blessing. Vayikishamam es haTorah vayavdilu kol arev miYisrael. And it was after they heard this that they separated out all the Arv, the in-mixing people from the Jewish people. Now that doesn't mean that they separated out Jewish women who married Moabite men. It means they separated out Jewish men who married Moabite women and sent them, the women and the children, away. Now, I can give you the firm answer to why this isn't a problem, but I will first ask you if you can come up with why is this not to be taken seriously from a halachic perspective? That it sounds like from Ezra and Nehemiah you can't marry Moabite women because they chose to send them away rather than convert them or let them stay. But that's actually not as much of a problem as it might sound. Any guesses? We also talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
So Sancheriv came when the Jewish people were exiled.
Actually, this falls into what I was saying beforehand, which is who wrote Rus. Okay, and there are those who hold that Rus was written actually in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, because Ezra and Nehemiah were very strict. With
and Rus was a response to
was a response to that.
Right. So that's the academic approach to Rus. I don't know if I buy it. but I'll give you an easier way to get out
The
of.
Aramaic that's used in Rus is a
Yeah.
later Aramaic.
Yeah, they use that a lot to date things, and my response to that has always been that the Anshe Knesset HaGadol are the ones that finalize the canon.
Right.
So
Categorize everything.
right. So if you find later terminology in certain books, it's very possible that came from the Anshe Knesset HaGadol who were later. So Sancheriv comes before Galus Bavel and mixes up all the different nations. That includes Ammon and Moab. So the people who are living in Ammon and Moab are not Ammoni and Moavi. Once Sancheriv mixes everybody up, remember, until Sancheriv, you are where you come from. Once you can no longer be where you come from, there is no concept anymore of Ammoni and Moavi. The Ammonites and the Moabites who are marrying the Jews in Ezra and Nehemiah are not Ammonites and Moabites any more than
India,
they could be from anywhere, any more than there are Amalekites. If you met an Amaleki at the time of Ezra or the time that we live in today, and someone says, I'm an Amaleki, there's no substance to that claim because there is no more nation of Amalek living where Amalek lived. So once Sancheir shows up, all bets are off in terms of genealogy and national status, and therefore it's Ezra and Nehemiah are essentially using borrowed terms. They're describing people as Ammoni, Moavi, Prizi, Chivi, etc., who maybe they live there now, but that's not their original origin. And therefore, when Ezra and Nehemiah are saying send them away, it's less about the fact that you're not allowed to marry into them than it is these are foreign people and they're tearing at the fabric of this nascent Jewish settlement. Now, I can't give you that answer for the following. In Malachim Aleph, Shlomo HaMelech is taken to task. V'Hamelech Shlomo ahav nashim nachriot ravot. King Shlomo loved many foreign women. Yes, Bat Paro and Bat Paro. Who are these foreign women that he loved? Moaviot, Ammoniot, Adomiot, Tzedniot, and Chitiot. They are Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Tzedonite, and Hittite. Minagoyim asher amar Adonai el bnei Yisrael lo tavou bahem v'hem lo yavou bachem. These are the people that God said you're not to marry into them, and they're not allowed to marry into you. Achein yito es levavchem acharei Elohehem, because they're going to cause your heart to stray after their gods. Davak Shlomo lahava, but Shlomo clung to them in love. Vayi lo nashim sarot shvameot pilagshim shloshmeot veyato nashav eslibon. He had 700 concubines. 300 wives. 700 wives and 300 concubines, and they caused his heart to stray. Vayila es ziknas Shlomo nashav hitos levavo acharei Elohim acherim v'lo haya levavo shalem im Adonai lohav kilevav David aviv. His heart is not like David's was. Vayila Shlomo acharei ashtoret Elohei tzidonim acharei milkom shikutz amonim, and he follows after these various idolatries of the nations where he had these women from. Vayash Shlomo hara b'nei Adonai v'lo milei acharei Adonai keDavid aviv. And Shlomo did the evil that was in the eyes of God, and he didn't follow after David his father. Az Yiboneh Shlomo bama l'chamosh shikutz Moav, and then Shlomo built a bama, a private altar to Kamosh, the avodah zarah of Moab. Bahar asher al pnei Yushalayim v'meloch shikutz bnei Ammon, and he also did it for the god of Ammon. He made all of his wives their own private altars. And this obviously incurs the wrath of God, who appeared to Shlomo multiple times. And Shlomo did not guard this that God had commanded. Because of this, says God, I'm going to tear away your kingdom and give it to your servants. So this is the end of Malchus Beis David in its pristine form. It continues. There's still Melech Yehuda, but the complete kingship of the Jewish people is torn asunder because Shlomo marries non-Jewish women, specifically Moabites and Ammonite women. That I can't get out of with a Sancheiriv back pocket move. That sounds like a much harsher indication that now you can still answer and say, well, he didn't convert them. He could have converted them. Yes, halachically, it is permissible to marry them, but you have to convert them. He didn't convert them, right? If we really wanted to stretch ourselves into a pretzel, I'm sure we could go there. But I think we need some other way of understanding the problem of maintaining the problem of Ammoni and Moavi women not being allowed into the Kahal, and Rus, yes, being allowed at some point into the Kahal, and why she is and they are not. So I wanna kind of leave that gnawing at you, and then I guess we have a couple more minutes. The last thing I want to do to prepare for the next parak is just go over the mitzvos that are associated with them, and they are essentially Leket, right? You get 2 times that the Torah mentions the mitzvah of Leket. One is Vayikra, what is it? 9 and 10, and then in Devarim. When you reap the harvest of your land, lo tekale pa'as sancha liktzor, you should not reap all the way to the edges of your field. The leket kitzircha lo talaket, or gather the gleaning of your harvest. That is Vayikra 9. Vayikra 10 is v'karmecha lo ta'olel u'perakarmecha lo talaket la'ani v'lager ta'azov otam anya Adonai Elohechem. Shouldn't pick your vine bare or gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You should leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God. Okay, so that is Leket, Parrot. There's a whole bunch of different, Peah is in here, a whole bunch of different halachos of what the poor are allowed to collect. You get a very similar, but not exactly the same description in Deuteronomy 24. Ki tiktzur kitzircha basantcha v'shachachta omer basadeh lo tashuv lekachto. When you reap the harvest in your field and overlook a sheaf in the field, don't turn back to get it. La ger v'le'asum la'mana yiyeh. It should be for the ger, the orphan, the almana, leman yivarechacha Adonai lehecha b'chol ma'aseh yadecha, so that God should bless you in all your undertaking. Ki tachbot zeitcha lo tefa'er achareha. And when you beat down the fruit of your olive trees, lo tefa'er acharecha, do not go over them again. Lager liyasum ulamana yiyeh. They should also be for that same group of people. Ki tivtzor karmecha lo ta'olel acharecha lager liyasum ulamana yiyeh. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, don't pick it over again. It should go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. V'zacharta ki eved hayisa be'eretz Mitzrayim. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. Al kain anochi mitzavcha la'asos es hadavar hazeh. That is why I have commanded you to on this matter. So you were slaves in Egypt, and therefore you have to leave aside all of this. And the Mishnah in Peah gets very specific about how this works. That you have the sickle and the way they would basically cut with one hand and grab with the other hand, and whatever they didn't grab lands on the floor. That's Leket. We're going to see that what Rus collects is not necessarily in the halachic category of Leket, and that's going to be an interesting point to try to understand whether or not she's familiar with these halachos. Meaning, I don't know what the law of the land was in Moab. Can poor people collect? Can they not collect? Can they collect anything? She's certainly not familiar with the halacha when it comes to it, because what she's collecting is not what is halachically permissible for her to collect. It's a little bit of a gray area. And I think that gets us up to speed for chapter 2. And I think we'll stop over here and we'll start chapter 2, please God, next week.